physically threatened in Oelwein at all, but the town where I started this whole deal, which was in Idaho, and I had gone out there to do a magazine story, and it was a town that had a lot of meth in it back in '99, and I that's where I became fascinated with this whole story. And I actually spent months doing the same thing in that town in Idaho that I would ultimately do in Iowa, and wasn't able to sell a book about it, and so the whole thing sort of came to naught. But that was the one time that town was, in some ways I'm happy I wasn't allowed to write about it, because it was so sort of David Lynchian. It was much smaller, and 1,286 people, and I do think in journalism there's almost such a thing, as opposed to in fiction, that there's stories that are just too good to write because nobody will believe them. And in this particular town, there was one of the wealthiest ranching families in the state was there, and they had, I think, 7 children, and one was running for Senate, and the other one was a meth addict, or one of the other ones was a meth addict, and the daughter was married to the sheriff, and the sheriff's brother was in cahoots with the Mexican trafficker in the area. And there was a school for the deaf on Main Street, and the bus driver was dating the DEA agent who'd been dispatched from Boise to sort of figure out why in the world this town had come to what it was. And one night after I'd been there for weeks and weeks, I was in the bar, and I went to the men's room, and I was, going to the bathroom. Sheriff's brother walks in and locks the door, and there was I'm sorry, I never get a chance to tell this story, so you're going to have to bear with me. But there was an old feedlot outside of town that had been abandoned some time before, and he basically said, I know exactly what you're doing, and I know how, I don't like it, so we're going to take you out the feedlot, and we're going to shoot you, and we're going to fucking bury you. And thought, well, that, thanks for being honest, and so I said to him that, that's fine, but I actually, what you don't know is I actually work for the New York Times, and I've been filing one story after I don't even know where the Times office is, I mean, I'd never been to the New York Times. I certainly wasn't in their employ. And I've been filing all these stories, and we're doing a big deal about you, and here's what I know about you. I mean, it got weirder. Anyway, I knew a lot about the guy, and so I said, if you can do that, but my editor's going to know exactly who did it, and it's like somebody's going to come looking, and after that, we there was this sort of détente, and we went outside and drank bourbon, and that was the only working meth lab I've ever been in my life, because that guy took me to his trailer, and that was the one time where I thought, what the fuck am I doing, man? Like this is not worth it, But Oelwein never, there was, that guy didn't live in Oelwein,
Right.
I didn't meet him,
And 4 in the morning in Oelwein when you're tweaking?
Is, my guess is that given the limited amount of things that there are to do at 4 o'clock in the morning when you're tweaking, that's a really good reason to keep tweaking, because, kind of what else are you going to do? I mean, it's sad to say, but I mean, that's the story of addiction anyway, right? I mean, once your life is run by whatever it is, alcohol or meth or whatever. I mean, 4 in the morning is always a shitty time, right? It doesn't matter if you're in New York or Oelwein, And so, I mean, in that way, I think there is no difference.
Yeah. All right, well, let's open it up to your questions. And please, questions, not statements, so Nick gets to talk.
As you just mentioned, 4 in the morning anywhere is boring, so I think in small towns drugs have always been a problem. So what makes methamphetamine special, do you think, in these communities? What makes it stick out more than cocaine, which has been, a problem in small towns around the country as long as anywhere else? And
what I meant is that if you're that 4 in the morning is a hard time if you're addicted to something, because all you want is to do that same thing over again, and so that makes it a difficult sort of that's kind of the lousy part of addiction. In terms of meth and small towns, I mean, you're absolutely right. Rural America has for a very long time had higher rates of addiction than the urban United States. In some ways, this actually goes back to before the American Revolution. And the thing that, the other thing that I would say in response to your question is that alcohol and cigarettes are going to kill a lot more people next week than meth will all year. They're all drugs. But the thing about meth in a place like this is that eventually when you sort of do the math and say, okay, I used to have a job at Iowa Ham making $18 an hour, and as soon as it was bought by Gillette in 1992, now I'm making $5.60 an hour, and I have no benefits. And the stock that I owned in Iowa Ham, I no longer own. A certain number of people will look at that and say, I can either keep doing this and I can do meth, which will help me actually work a double shift so that I can mitigate a little bit against the economic depredation that now characterizes life in my town. And a lot of people did that. Meth is a working drug. It's not in this context, it's really not a recreational drug. It's more of a vocational one, and has been throughout its history. That is a particular thing about meth, as opposed to any other. But the addendum to that is that another proportion of the population will say, I can actually make the drug myself and sell it and make a lot more money than I can doing anything else. And so I think those two things together, it becomes kind of it becomes ineluctable. I mean, it's kind of an unstoppable thing.
Thank you. I haven't read the book yet, but I just want to know if you could comment on the patterns of production and distribution. Do you have local producers? Are they coming under a competition from, for instance, Mexican super labs, or do those super labs exist? Or
I think a lot of people, when they think about meth, and I've fell prey to this for a long time, is that the sort of enduring kind of morality play aspect of it is, oh my God, people make it in their bathtub, and that is a very important part of the meth market. It's more important now than it has been in the recent past, but a much larger portion of the market was fed and continues to be fed by 5 principal trafficking organizations. There was this whole thing in Oelwein that, there were a lot of batchers that considered themselves to be sort of the last line of entrepreneurs against the notion of corporate takeover in the form of, Gillette buys Iowa Ham and then is bought by Cargill, and every time, it was bought by Tyson, and, every time the jobs shrink, the wages go down, this is bad. Well, we know a way that we can actually create a black market economy, and we can get rich and we can keep people happy while we do it. I mean, that was a firm line